Hi guys, you're in the right place if you want to learn how to draw by understanding what you're looking at rather than breaking things down into shapes. And today we're going to be doing this green heron. So first of all, thank you so much to Rodri Ford for use of this gorgeous photo of yours for today's tutorial. So you need your scrap piece of paper and a pen that's going to behave itself. As you see, I'm kind of like worried about this one. It used to behave so nicely over the last couple of tutorials and now it's going a little bit blotchy. Anyway, we'll see. So, okay, get yourself organized, and while you're doing that, I just want to talk a little bit about these birds. We haven't done anything this size before. As far as herons go, it is one of the smaller ones, but they're still a good maybe 14 to 18 inches tall. We have a very sort of like large, bulky looking body here, and this is because the wings are large and they all fold up onto the back. So he has a very typical oval, hunched heron shape. They are fishermen, so he's got this heavy bill. They fish in the shallow edge of the rivers, and the neck of the green heron isn't as long as a great blue heron, but it's still the heavy bill, the head, and the neck that goes into the water, while the bulk of the body does not. Okay, and this is very different from the kingfishers that we have been drawing, where the entire body goes into the water. So they're smaller birds, they're powerful and whatnot. But this guy is larger, and it is the bill, the head, and the neck that goes into the water that catches the fish. So, what else? Once again, I've selected a photo where we've got his back to us. I don't know why that's been so appealing lately, but it's like, oh my god, this is such a cool picture. These bum views. Yeah, just like a little bit different. So there is a little bit of reflection on the screen that's making it a little tricky for me to see. But what I want to just maybe zoom in on is, do you see this? This is the curve of the wing at the very top of his back and his shoulder. And here we've got his throat, upper chest and throat coming into his neck. So it's not a dead on picture. He's not square to us on his back. So for today's sketch, I think what we can do is, if we can end up with this beautiful, back, heavy oval shape where the wings are folded nicely over the body, and then we'll put in, what I'd like you to aim for is this curve of his throat. Now, the other thing that is so fabulous about this photo is, do you see these feathers that are coming off the back of his head and his neck? Typically, when the heron is resting, the head isn't turned, and all of these feathers here blend straight into the back. So you don't see this detail. So this is kind of cool as well. They're wonderful birds. I've seen a number of them at the river. Okay, enough of my delay tactics. Maybe what you can do is intentionally choose a smaller piece of paper, which is what I'm trying to. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to force myself to draw something a little bit small, so the whole birdie fits on the paper. It's going to be a challenge. What do I do? Okay, well, let's just give it a go. So, do you see how, in proportion, the head is so much smaller from the body? This, you know, not even close. Okay, so this also is very, very different from any of the songbirds and the warblers that we've sketched in the past. So let's learn from this and start by doing an extra small, look, blotch already, you know, extra small little forehead, a little bit of a dip right above the eye, and then we're curving straight back to these beautiful feathers that are coming off the head and over the back. And we just want to try to keep things small for now. I'm just going to do a little bit of this darker detail around and really pay attention to getting this angle in the tilt of the head. So this is a little bit darker here. This is the shading in front of the eye. And this is the shadow of those feathers off the bill. I want to put this beautiful, brilliant yellow eye with this dark perimeter, very dark lens. And some depth in front of the eye, above the bill, and then on the darker feathers. Coming off the head. So I have seen a number of these herons. I've seen them in different lighting, daytime, dusk. They're always perched on dead trees and logs at the side of the river. And not once have they looked green. So he's called a green heron, but he is actually quite, dusky. I don't want to commit too much to the angle of the feathers off the head because we really want to get this classic heron, narrow head and heavy bill. Now, because the bill is so large, we can't get away with no detail in it, all right? So we're kind of forced to be mindful of these different tones and curvatures, I guess. that are in the bill itself. You know, when we were doing a little warbler, we never paid attention to any of that stuff, right? At least I didn't. Maybe you guys did in your sketches. Oh, and hey, I have to say thank you to whoever it was who sent me some money. That was like so amazing. That was so kind of you. And I'm so grateful. And trust me, I know the value of money. And for you to have made that decision to send it to me, it was very emotional. And I'm super grateful. That's the whole thing with this anonymous donation, right? You can't actually figure out who to say thank you to. So it's just global. You know who you are. Right now you're sketching a green heron with me. And I'm super, super, super thankful. Okay, are you sticking with a smallish head like this? His eyes should have been bigger. Okay, I don't want to get in trouble with all this down here, but what I would like to do is see how the feathers coming off the underneath, oops, splotch, splotch, of the bill, they go out pretty far. See? Because in front of the eye we have here, and then the chin feathers go out a fair distance. And then these chin feathers kind of come into the neck. And then here we've got this curvature. This is going to be like the bottom of his throat coming into the chest here. So how about we just kind of mess around a little bit with these here. And just try your best to get this angle not too big, because we've got this large, heavy body to sketch. So we come out off his throat to the upper chest. Okay, I kind of screwed up here because, you know, with your pen, you've got to pay attention to what's dark, not sketching what's light. So we've got this darker cheek patch here. It's coming into the top of his. And all this is going to be dark if we like this angle. It's tricky, eh? Where the neck curves, and then we're going into the body. Okay, now these feathers off the back of his head, we want to have this nice, and it's okay if you just kind of go with a straight line, because really, that's how he looks, and it's so typical for a heron that's resting to have their head kind of like tucked in. I want to follow this darker, see this dark band that comes almost right off the eyebrow. Just have these darker feathers. define more the curve of his head. And then the upper eye patch. And this really nice kind of brownish rust. Okay, I'll mess around with this area later. And we're not going to commit too much here, but what we do want to do is from this is the cheek patch here. These feathers all kind of like end around here. Shorter feathers off his face. And then a little bit longer to his crest. Keep these feathers short in your sketch. We can lengthen them later, but what we really want to show is the curve of its back right here. Maybe. Okay, this just a few little contours. Oh gosh, I didn't even think about how we were going to handle that. Now we have the shadow here from these crest feathers that are on the other side of his head. And then we've got this sloping off his back here, top of the wing. And then this nice, beautiful, heavy oval shape to go down to these perfectly folded wings. Now, I would like to make, okay, I want to have this down straight a bit more. Coming in at the bottom. And we've got different sort of like lighter, airy feathers that are on top of the heavier flight feathers. I'll just have that with some V's, and then we can do our shading to pick up this heavier gray, the bottom part. Now here, what we want to have is maybe just do some V's and stuff to show these feathers at the top of his back, that because his head is twisted, they're not lying all perfectly on top of they're not lined up nicely on the top of his back because he's got this little twist there. So we'll just do some shading. To show the dark spots where these big feathers are casting shadows on the ones underneath. So now what we need to do is, because this part of his body is in shadow, we're going to very carefully use our pen to shade this part here underneath this sort of like line where we've got the curve of his back. Meeting his throat. I'm totally guessing here. I can't because of the reflection on the tablet. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. And then here we would just want to pull this in. I think, see, there's some staggering when you come down here. Some of the feathers of the wing. I'll just try to join this up. Keep this a little bit jagged. He looks like a perfectly composed oval. But he won't be. So we'll just use different weights on our pen to get some of the shading in there. Just different pressures. And we're marking the shadows, the borders of the feathers. We're training our eye not to look at the light, but the dark. And our pen is adding the darkness to our sketch. You don't have to make yourself crazy by doing like every single shadow, unless you've got that level of patience and you can and you've got the time. But when we just add some of these heavy lines through his back, it's just going to show where these fluffy top feathers on the wings. Actually, I want to come back and do that later. I wanted to get this shading in. So let's just lightly first, because it's not all going to be the same. We want to have the border between the throat feathers, because these are facing us. So just get some lighter shading down first. And then we're going to be conscious of where we leave our pen away from certain areas that are light. I'm going to bring this up a little bit more. And how about we determine this border here? See how this amount in shadow is less than that amount over there. So for me, I think I've made my shadow part a little bit too big. So I'm just going to shade in this. Take it down to his leg. Remember, for this shading here, I have to be mindful that this border should be jagged, okay, to represent, to show the different feathers of his back. So, without making myself nuts here, let's just keep going with, just pick an area where you want to do your shading and just work carefully and slowly through your sketch. And it, you know, obviously it doesn't need to be exact with the photo, okay? But when you just do enough to give the impression of what's going on, that's pretty fabulous. And basically what we've got is 2 layers of feathers. We have the heavy flight feathers that are underneath, and these very fine, almost, you know, every heron is like this. They're like these light, fluffy hair feathers along their back. And I don't know if they're to help shed the water, since they're always hanging out of the river and they might get rained on or something. I don't know, but it's just very, very classic that they have these very loose feathers along their back. So how are we going to depict those? Because it's a very important feature for the heron. And the way we're going to do that is by just carefully shading in some lines along the back, and the lines that we're shading in are the spaces of dark between the lighter feathers. So don't get too carried away as long as you pick up your pen. And the light is catching the curve of his back here. So look how blotchy my pen is being today. Thank you very much. I'll have to use these blotches to bleed them into some of the shading underneath. And honestly, if it helps to, like, since you kind of like understand what you want to do with your sketch, it's okay to stop looking at the photo and just add the lighter areas of shading at the top of the back. Give them some length to show that you've got some long feathers. Stagger your lines. And then just make it a little bit heavier and darker when you get around to the right side of the bird. So we're kind of going from what we're actually seeing to like just understanding it and then giving the impression of it in our sketch. And if it's too tricky, just make them lighter on one side than on the other. I have to stand up for a second, you guys, because I have this. Okay. Good. I finally got rid of my tripod with the stick. Oh! Behave yourself. That's gonna go away, isn't it? Oops. It'll go away in a second. Sorry. And so, okay, so I got rid of my, look at all these blotches. I got rid of my tripod with my stick. I got this other stand. And gosh, did it ever take me a long time to figure it out, because every time I put my phone on it, it started to sync, even though this stupid stand was so darn expensive. See what happens when you send me money? I spent it on improving my equipment. But anyway, I got it all figured. I got it all sorted. And when my phone is properly balanced on the stand, then it doesn't sink. And you're not going to see the photo floating out of the picture frame. I've done two, I don't know. See, you get carried away. Sort of losing a little definition in these feathers here. Let's have some better contrast. Don't let me forget to give him legs. Poor little birdie with nothing to stand on. I want this angle to be different. It should be a little higher off the throat. There's the curve of the neck down into the shoulder. And then from the shoulder, immediately to the rib cage, the curve of the body. Now, if you've done the smart thing and decided not to make yourself mental by doing a bunch of detail on the back, that's fabulous. What I'd like you to do is check your perimeter curves. See if you've got a fairly typical heron shape to your sketch, okay? So do that. And then if you're happy with how it looks, I'd like you just to add some deeper shading almost through the center, off center, okay? And if you can just take a minute to put some lines in there, it's going to show this wing. And when you do it off center, it's going to show he's got a slight twist. So that'll be grand. And then I'd like you to have some just tones, two separate tones between the feathers, the lighter feathers on his back and the feathers on his wing. So if you can't be bothered to do the hairy feather nonsense, just use different pressure with your pen to get the idea of these two different tones. Come on, look at these splotches. You just want to show that the wings are folded. And if the wings are folded, there's going to be different shading, there's going to be different textures. I just try to get some of that on with your pen. Okay, I'm just gonna like lightly shade him in. I say I'm gonna lightly shade him in, and then I end up doing the darker, heavier pressure. these around. Change the direction of your pen to get the impression of how the feathers are falling. And then when we use heavier pressure down here, it does help show how the top feathers are falling over his wings. These feathers are nice and light. Let's begin to pick up some shadow with this curve, his body. Okay, how about we just spend a little bit of time on his head and the neck. Okay, so let's go back and just add off the bill. Now, even if you feel the head that you've drawn is too small, without seeing your work, I think it would be safest to leave the size the way it is, okay? For these guys, it's much better to go a little bit on the small side. I'm just using heavier pressure on my pen to get in some of these tones, these beautiful gray and rust feathers coming off his head. And then at the back of the eye. See how heavy the eye ring is? So if you've done the eye a little bit too small, like I feel I have, you can just make sure you've got that eye ring nice and big. I have some of this darker definition in front of the eye. Let's be mindful of where you are in the sketch. Just go from one feature to the next. And when you focus on just trying to get those, a few of those key features in, you're going to end up with something that's recognizable. And if not, you could always put a label on it. have to say that to my husband. I have to say, look at the heron I drew. Otherwise, he just says, oh, that's a very nice birdie, dear. So this cheek patch that's rust colored, can you try to do some very pale shading? Because we want to show how the light is catching the side of his head. Here. I'm actually going this way with my pen in the hopes that pushing doesn't give me as many blotches as when I was pulling. Now we do have to give him some shading at the top of his back, okay? Because these feathers off his head are casting a bit of a shadow. Over his back. Gosh, I know it's tempting to dick around with these angles, but we really have to have this smooth curve. Off the head. And I want to see how big I've got this with the eye ring and this cheek patch. I got to make it a bit smaller. I just have to bring in a bit more shading. Staying away from that eye ring. Okay, and let's, while we're at it, just very light shading on his bill, okay? Don't go nuts. There is like some very nice heavy lines, though. They're not going to be lines, they're going to be indentations. So how about we just try to lightly shade it in the bill. And go back. And give it a little bit of contour. Because this indentation that I'm doing now, that's just a curve in the bill. It's not the bottom one. Hey, I haven't drawn upside down once. I was just tempted to want to turn my picture. Let's leave it like that. Forget the legs. Okay, these guys, they're always perched. They're always hanging out on a dead tree, driftwood, a log, river debris. So whenever you sketch a green heron, you don't have to draw any leaves on a tree. But okay, so now see how, okay, this is actually the other, the branch has a fork in it. So his heavy 3 toes are curled around this branch, and we're only seeing the back toe and like the palm of his foot right here. So if that hasn't screwed up your, forget this side branch, let's just keep our picture straight, and we've got this short little leg, kind of heavy. All right, just keep it really short. These guys are not tall. All their height is all their height is in their body, as opposed to a great blue heron where all their height is in their legs and their body too. So we've got shading on this side of the leg. We see a little bit of the joint here. We've got his back toe that comes almost straight down. We don't see much of the pad that we know is on the bottom part of the toe, and then we've got the claw. And here we've got the heavier part of a little bit that we see with the front toe. This one here. So just give an impression of it, and then the knuckle. Then this leg. Which we see more of because he's got a twist in his body. All right. Have it a little bit narrow first. And then we've got part of the pad we see, and then the back toe. Coming this way, not straight. Thicker where it joins the foot. And this one, I would like you to give the underpad. Because of the angle, we can see it. And the claw comes out pretty much straight from the end of the toe. We can see the underpad. None of the foot going this way. Thickening at the bottom of the leg where we've got the joint. And we see a little bit of the pad going this way. As this toe curves around the log. as we've got in shadow. And we've got a couple of joints that we see where the tissue is folded. Got some of the joints here, or just like where the tissue folds. Now let's just shade a little bit where this part of his leg. Is in shadow. This part of the toe is in shadow. Dark brown claw. And then with this leg, if you've made it too narrow, when you're going to shade it, you can make it a little thicker. I mean, there's sturdy legs. Not little toothpicks. And then this toe here. Okay, so you know what we're going to put them on? We're going to put them, so forget this branch here, this part of the driftwood, we're just going to put them on this one. Okay? Gosh, I hope you weren't working on his face while I was working on the legs. So what we need to do is run the log we can always curve it around his feet. It's almost like straight, and then through to his foot here, and then it curves down in the and then make the log thick, because we don't see any of his other toes. Okay, his front toes, I mean. And you know, like the driftwood and the branches and the logs that are all part of the debris at the riverbank is all kind of like messy anyway, so it's not weird having him on a log that's got a strange angle to it. And it's not weird for a log to have bark that looks like this. Okay, so now that you've got your log in there, fix his foot if it looks like you'd see more of it. Okay? And where the shading is. So do you want to just sort of like fix up a little bit of this here? He is going to be casting a shadow on the driftwood. I want to have some distinction between his toes and the log. And we can do that just by shading in the log itself. one of these days we're going to be so good at drawing birds that the tutorial is going to be about how to do bark on trees and branches. Okay, I want to fix up his legs. Oh, there we go. And I just turn. I have to be careful that I don't screw him up too much. I just want to darken his feet a little bit. Not too much, and then I'll just darken the under pad of his toe, and then make sure that I've got some distinction between his toe and the branch, which I'm kind of losing. You know, honestly, I kind of like it better when I leave like this white border between the branch and the toe. It's not realistic, but it does emphasize the two different elements. Might as well just shade the bottom of the log so it's like, because it's in shadow, right? Have some definition between the log and his toes. Okay, so in general, I think I'm kind of happy with the way he looks. So what I'm going to do now is just go through the sketch and see where the why did I give him such a big white section in front of his iPad here? I wish I had done a larger eyeball. Let's darken up a little bit here. Give it a bit more oomph. Okay, so what I was wanting to say is I'd like you to have a close look at what you've done for his back, okay? Because the practice is important. So if you need to add a couple of extra lines and whatnot, not heavy, but some narrow lines through his back, to give the distinction between those lighter top feathers and the heavy wing feathers, I'd like you to do that. And what I'm just fixing now is this curve of his back. Where it meets up with his chest and stuff. I had that a little bit too big, so I just want to add a little bit more shadow. I'm not doing everything. Definitely one of the more complex sketches that we've done. You know, if you're getting tired, that's fair enough. There's been a lot. But what I'd like is if you have ended up with a birdie that's got a bit of a twist to him, right? He's not sitting square. He's got shading on one side, lighter tones on the other. And he's got some of these dark layered features through his back. And if you've managed to do that, I think that's like 10 out of 10, right? We could spend a lot of time doing more shading. But, you know, it gets to the point where you don't have to look at the photo anymore. And just figure out what works best for your sketch. And that's fabulous. I want to shade his legs a little bit more. Kind of okay. Did we forget anything? He's got legs. He's got a bill. He doesn't have a fish, but that's a good thing. Because I can't imagine the fish that I would end up drawing for him. Okay, you guys, I think this guy's a win. I like him. It's good enough for the wall. And I'm sure yours is more fabulous. So, as usual, Thank you so much for your company. What the heck is that? That's a bug by the river. Sorry about the blotchy pen. You know, like, just when everything is like... Anyway, maybe this pen just wanted to take a break from doing sketches. Probably like you guys. Okay, so thank you so much for your company. Have a fabulous day. I'll see you next time.